Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lord Grub here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering natural health on your Wednesday morning Rise and Shine. And this morning here, we're looking at the topic, the high cost of unhealthy foods, the high cost of unhealthy foods, so the high medical cost of unhealthy foods. And we're looking at some of the things that are going on in the marketing strategies that are happening in the world right now. So the high cost of the high medical cost of unhealthy foods is what we're looking at here this morning. So welcome again to our live talk program and top of the morning here. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on today the Lord has given you. So we'll begin with a short word of prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, we thank thee again for the blessings of your word. We thank you for the blessings, your Lord, of a mind that you give us today, Lord, to investigate and to look into things. Pray, Lord, that you may bless each and every one of us that is here this morning. And may you be with us, dear Lord, as we make choices from day to day of how to stay healthy and how to take care of our minds and our body. Be with us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. So again, we're looking at the high medical costs of unhealthy foods, and we're looking at how this type of thing is promulgated and promoted in our world today. And when we look at this, it's important to understand that part of what's going on here is not just the human nature. The human nature plays a factor in the lean that we have, this bent that we have to eat in certain foods. There's various different factors that comes into play when we talk about unhealthy foods. So this morning I'm going to talk about one part, or some of them, a few of them I should say, but mainly one thing I'll be talking about here from an article I'm going to be sharing with you on what's happening in the market, so to speak, with foods. So I start off by reading Matthew chapter 24, verse 7. Matthew chapter 24, verse 7. And it says, "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdoms against kingdom. And there shall be famine and pestilence and earthquake in diverse places." So famine, pestilence, or earthquake in diverse places. So the earth produces its bounty, and whatever the earth produces when it comes on to food is more than what we can consume as a human being, right? So there's more foods than what we can consume as a human being. And the food is produced, and what the problem is that often the food that is primarily produced by the earth, most of it we have to process and eat. And so when we are processing and eating the food, the processors understand that it's convenience and it's the cheaper the ingredients, basically oil, carbs, and protein is the less ingredients you have to put in it, the cheaper the ingredients is, the more profit you can make. But a lot of the time, these foods are some of the most unhealthy foods. And right now in the United States, as I'm going to cover in the article I'm going to read in a second here, is that the disease load has gotten high, and the manufacturers of foods are looking for new markets to promote and sell a lot of these cheap junk foods. And so what we're going to cover here is this idea that a lot of the manufacturers are switching to other places, and the places that they're switching to are developing nations that are having more money, more expendable cash that they can spend on fast foods and foods that are basically, low in health and will create a lot of health problems. So as this problem goes forward, and as there's a switch, and the switch happen, what will basically go down is that the switch is happening, and the medical load that these low energy disease causing foods will do to the developed nation is what they'll do to what is being done in places like America and Europe. But the problem with it is that these developed nations don't have the type of money to be able to spend on medical costs, and the amount of money that is spent on the technologies that are used, the medical arts, they call it, in places like America. So what will happen is that what we are experiencing in America with this high cost of health will be devastating in poorer countries and developing countries. So this is our premise for this morning here. So hopefully this will be a blessing to you. So I'm going to start off, continue reading. Oh, I'll read another text here just to set a kind of parameter in your mind. In Romans 8 verse 22, it says, "For we know the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now." So this whole idea of the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain is not a statement that things are going great for human beings. As you know, as a principle, and I share it with you here again, as a principle in the Bible, it's taught that human beings started out in a high, healthy way. So started out with a healthier body, more vibrant, more vigor. And as life goes on and sin takes its toll, we develop more diseases and more weaknesses. This is what the narrative of the Bible teaches. Now, in modern science and evolution and geology and all that type of study, they teach that human beings were starting off from a point of view of weakness and they evolving into something better. And this is how they teach. So modern science teach more we're getting better. The Bible teach that we're getting worse. And so if you follow humanity and what's been happening, you could see that the logics of observation tells you that we're getting more disease and more weaker, not stronger. And the human frailty is increased. Now we're having kids dying of all kind of cancers and so forth and so on. And the old people are decrepit and just suffering. So that tells me that things are getting worse, not better. So as they get worse, then if I ask you a question, what type of food would best to be eaten? Food that is more highly processed and more technologically advanced, or food that is less processed and more closer to nature? Most actually the answer with that would be closer to nature. So when you think about the type of food that's being produced by the big manufacturer, it brings to mind this article I'm going to read. And all of this, what I'm trying to say is just to set up the article so we can have a discussion at the end, or I can talk about some stuff at the end. So this article is taken from Mother Jones and it's written by Tom Philpott. And it's entitled, "Americans Have Soured on Junk Food." And it says, don't worry, companies have a plan. So Americans have soured on junk food. Companies have a plan. Selling fast food in the fast food nation ain't what it used to be. Between 2002 and 2016, KFC's U.S. footprint shrank from 5,472 locations to 4,270 locations. So you can see that's over 1,000 location dropped within a little bit over 10 years. But Ghana, the fried chicken giant, popularity is soaring. Here is, and it says here, the company, the New York Times reports, is winning customer with an aggressive marketing campaign designed to appeal to a first generation of middle-class consumers looking for new experiences, with appeal from hustler and influencers who rose from the streets and climbed the social ladder. So it will elaborate more, but I just want to add this here from myself here that I've observed this also. When the marketing campaigns are not working as well in certain communities that are getting more affluent and they're understanding, like in the first world nation like America, they're understanding more about the ill effect of eating deep fried chicken every day. Well, they start to shift the market into poor communities, even within the United States. And I've done program here where I cover a lot of the fast food and the junk food outlets, whether it be the Asian foods, Chinese foods, whatever it is. They're more in the poor communities, and even people who have money sometimes would have to go to these areas to go get the food, the more fast food, junk food. So this has been a marketing campaign even within the United States, if you understand what I'm saying. This is not something that's so much unique to what they're doing in foreign countries. They already have this thing worked out. So that's my opinion right there. So I just want to throw that out there. That is where it worked out in America, where if you look at a lot of where you have junk food and fast food is in some of the real poor communities. So back to the article here. It's a common pitch from Western fast food companies in the global South. Home cooked traditional fares represent old ways, while branded fast food means modernity and affluence, right? So in the Times it says, people march their sons and daughters to buy KFC and buy pizza, and they like to show them what we can afford, says Matilda Lair, who lectures about family and consumer science at the University of Ghana. KFC isn't just food, she says, it's social status. So KFC is social status. Now, this is important because the last time I visited Jamaica, and I'm thinking it was last year. So when I visited there, I'd been back in like a few years, so I hadn't visited in a while. So anyhow, I visited, and I was in Montego Bay, which is where you normally will call the tourist capital. It's the area where most of the tourists, you know, comes into the island and stay in certain locations there near there. But one thing that was fascinating to me that in the evenings, I was very impressed at, not in a positive way, at the amount of traffic that goes in and out of the fast food stores or the fast food outlets. And when I say the fast food outlets, I'm talking about your regular Wendy's, KFC, Pizza Hut, and stores like that. So that gives you an idea. When I say traffic, I mean like it's almost like you think it was a fire sale or they were giving away stuff or a yard sale was going on over there. There was just so much people. I was surprised, and especially what was surprising was when we went through the area at Saturday night, and I was like, I've never seen anything like that because normally when you go past like a fast food store here, this is a fast food store. People are going in and out. It matters, but it doesn't really matter. But here I was in Jamaica, and as I say, I haven't been back there in a while when I went back there last year. And I was so surprised by the volume of people flowing through and also the size of them because they had them where they were more almost close to like a restaurant. I mean, they're restaurants, but I mean just larger where you have more eating area. And I was quite impressed, especially Saturday night, because it was almost like something to do similar to something to do similar to like going out on a even trip, a special trip. But it was just fast food. It wasn't like going to a fancy restaurant. But I guess that was what it was like. So I was very surprised, and then I started to realize that it's part of the marketing strategy. It's part of the marketing campaign. So when I read this, I was like, oh, this is what's happening. It's actually a concerted effort to move the business to developing countries and bring the business there while the business is waning in the United States. So when I read this, I was like, yeah, I saw this on myself. So it is part of the plan. And so it's understandable, as I said here, the plan that they're having to shift it to certain other markets is something that's always been going on. Because if you think about it, you go into many affluent areas, and where you get is high-end stores, food stores. You get high-end products, organic products, all that type of stuff. So they had lost those battles in many areas within the United States, these big conglomerates. And so they are known to shift those products and those foods into the poor communities. And as they shift into the poor communities and health foods and vegetarian and vegan restaurants moved into the richer communities, I think they had a program that already was worked out. So now you can take that same marketing campaign and just bring it to a developing nation and sell it in the same manner. So we continue with the food. In short, continue with the article. In short, the U.S. market for junk food remains profitable, but publicly traded companies like Yum Brands, KFC parent, crave steady growth, and for that they must look beyond the United States. Today, just 20% of KFC outposts are located in the United States, while 60% are located in so-called emerging markets, low to middle income countries like Ghana, with growing middle class on the hunt for novelty food. So, you think about the significance of that here you have it. 60% of the outlets are in emerging markets. So not, there's markets that are not emerging markets per se, but the emerging markets are the markets that are markets that right now I've been hearing a lot of business leader telling young people, say if you're young, you're in your 20s, early 30s, and you're trying to make it here and you're getting some success, but in the success you're not getting as you ought to, what you must think about doing is going to places like in China, like Brazil, like Colombia, various different countries that are emerging markets that their growth is explosive. And if you go there and you go get part of that explosive growth, you could make phenomenal money. The same trend is afoot in the kind of processed food you find at the center of the supermarket. Back in June, Nestle put its candy division, think Butterfinger, Crunch, and Baby Ruth bars, up for sale because demand for sweets have fallen off in the United States, as the Times put it. While it retrenches in the United States, the Swiss candy giant, the world's largest packaged food conglomerate, is pushing hard into emerging markets with the same gusto as KFC. Last month, New York Times reporter Andrew Jacobs and Matt Rattel took a deep dive into Nestle long effort to conquer Brazil. The company has dispatched a team of 7,000 saleswomen from urban slums out to the countryside to expand its reach into 250,000 households in Brazil, furthest flung corners. Jacob and Richel report the items they're pushing include the sweet snacks, much like the ones Nestle is backing away from in the United States, as well as Muchelon, a sugary porridge for infants. The reason Big Foods is casting its gaze away from the country that first fell in love with corporate fare is simple. In industrialized economy like the United States and Europe, overall demand for food grows slowly at about the same rate as population, and that's not fast enough for investors who demand brisk profit growth every quarter. Worse still, there are signs that US kids are now eating less of the stuff as parents become more health conscious. So when you think about what's going on there, you see this comparison between KFC, or this the same type of move that KFC is making. Also, Nestle, I don't know how you call it, is making. So both companies, Nestle and KFC, they're making the move where, look, as people become more health conscious and parents cut back on sugary foods, cut back on deep fried foods and other type of junk foods, instead of just saying, well, we're losing a business, let's just pull back and do less. What they're saying, let's shed some brands, let's take up some new products, because basically it's just this, it's a formula. It's just a formula. If you're in America here, most people don't drink porridge and probably won't feed their kids porridge, but in other foreign countries, well, porridge is the thing. So hey, what you do, you go there and you just create a new product. It doesn't matter what the product is, we just create a product. It's basically a product that we package and we just sell stuff. That satisfied investors, and you create a whole new customer base and you keep making the same profit. So this is the type of thing that's going on. And more to read here, but when you look at this, you understand that when you're dealing with health, for you personally, when you're even talking to somebody, it's important for you to communicate to them that they're not just up against, their appetite and so forth. They're up against people who purposely are trying to market to them things that might be convenient, but they're dangerous to your health. It's quick money because it's cheap food, easy to process because you run it down a production line, but it's not good for your health. And this is part of it. The Bible talks about we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principality and wickedness in high places. That there's people who are there, whether they have a nefarious reason or not, but they're there basically having the fastest and easiest way to make profit off you. And so it's important for you not to be somebody's profit center, but basically be a person that you're just looking for good services and goods at the right price. and that's it. You're not looking for somebody to give you some subpar product that is denatured and it's gonna kill you, faster that you're supposed to die, but yet they're making phenomenal profits. So this is what's happening. So the same ploy that is used here is now being shifted to other countries. But remember my topic here, because I'm gonna get back to that: the high medical costs of the unhealthy food, because this is what it's gonna come down to. And when you think about that in the back of your mind, because we're going to pivot at the end. So just keep that in mind. That's my aim here, because I could be talking to you, forget what my aim is. I'm sharing this with you because remember, what we're paying in medical costs in America will devastate the foreign countries when they start coming down with their hip replacement surgeries. They're not going to be able to afford it when they start coming down with their diabetes and the high blood pressure and so forth. So keep that in mind. Watch this and see how this works. So, continue reading to the article. It says, but in places like Brazil and China, which boast 5,324 KFC outlets, more than 1,000 more than we have in the United States, widely available junk food is relatively new, and the class of people who can afford it and be convinced its status symbol is growing fast. All right? So keep that in mind. Of course, as highly marketed junk food swarms these regions, US-style diet-related maladies takes root. In Brazil, for example, the obesity rate has nearly doubled over the past decade. And Times report, and while Nestle touts its effort to fortify its products with vitamins and reduce sugar, the Times quoted one of the company's rural vendor who notes that what sells best as virtually all sugar sweetened items like Kit Kat, Nestle Great Red Berry, and a 3.5-ounce cup of yogurt with 17 grams of sugar, and Chandel's Pacoca, a peanut flavored pudding in a container the same size as the yogurt that has 20 grams of sugar, nearly the entire World Health Organization recommended daily limit. So you see what's happening there. They're saying they're putting more vitamins, they're fortifying the product. I'm assuming they're probably going to start doing more whole, like how the brands in America are putting more whole foods, like more whole wheat in their cereals and stuff. But whichever way happen, if you notice here, the things that they say is selling, what is people are buying is the sweet stuff, the sugary stuff. And as you know, with sugar clogs your system. It reduces your immunity. Your immune cells can't work as effective when your body is filled with too much sugar. It will increase your problems with diabetes and so forth. So this is what's happening. So keep that in mind, because this is the main thing. I want to come back to that part here that I just read. So the sugary stuff is selling. And if you think about it, that's part of what I say. When you're marketing to a person, you're marketing to their felt needs, to their desire. So the sweeter the stuff, the more salty the stuff, the more oily the stuff, the more convenient the food is, the food that will always sell. And you need to keep that in mind for yourself personally, that because of your taste bud and your desires, it's easier to market to you foods that are sweeter, oilier, saltier, and convenient. And that's it. And that's just simply the marketing strategy. So if you are a person that knows that this is your weakness, understand marketers will always get to you, and you will have struggles with your health simply because of this. But there are still segments of the U.S. food market that giants like Nestle covet, the very ones that have developed as a reaction against their trademark brand their trademark bland industrial fare. In sharp contrast to fast food and candy bars, artisanal foods and beverage are growing in popularity. Take coffee. Nestle is by far the globe's largest coffee roaster, with a jaw-dropping nearly 23% share of the global retail coffee market. But in the United States, sale of its Nestle instant coffee and even its Nespresso pods are starting to slump. And so last month, just weeks after putting its US candy business on the chopping block, Nestle plunked down a reported $425 million for 68% stake in an ultra hipster coffee roaster chain called Blue Bottle. By Nestle standard, Blue Bottle is a rounding error in terms of size. It's operate just 42 shops. So you just can think about the massiveness of Nestle Corporation, because buying 42 shops, 68% stake in a 42 shop chain is just a small drop in the bucket. The lure, of course, is growth. As the Financial Times recently noted, the kids like to drink coffee out. According to a National Coffee Association survey, 15% of the millennial aged 18 through 34 had their last cup of coffee in a cafe, and 32% had an espresso-based drink the day before the survey, the highest share for any age group, says the FT report. The paper added that U.S. specialty coffee shops generated $23 billion in sales in 2016 and are expected to reach $28 billion in 2021. A banker for JP Morgan Chase, which advised Nestle on the deal, put it this way to the FT: Blue Bottle is like an artist studio where you go for specialty coffee. Walk into any store and you're likely to feel a real downtown vibe. Nestle lacked it in its portfolio, something with this kind of unique profile, which is premium for aficionados. And thus, Big Food is emerging as a two-headed beast, one that will sell you a $5 pour-over coffee fussed over by a mustachio barista in the United States, or a cheap pouch of sugary pudding abroad. It's remained to be seen, of course, whether Blue Bottle can maintain its fanatical attention to quality and detail on the Nestle profit-minded gaze, or whether hipsters will still flock to cafes that are majority owned by the company most famous for sugary instant chocolate milk. And so there's the end of the article there. And so here you have the moves that are going on. So two moves there, right? Two moves. Move that they're making here, whether it be KFC or Nestle, or Nestle that is Nestle that is in this article, or the move by Nestle that they're trying to invest in something like Blue Bottle, which is basically a more high-end hipster joint that sell, expensive coffee to people who want to feel cool and want to feel like they're part of the downtown vibes. And I know the vibes. If you've ever been in certain location, you can feel that nice vibe that you feel like that, it's a good vacation or something you're on. So this is where most of the hipsters are moving. So when you look at this now, all of this, whether it be the pudding, or the sugar pudding, or the deep fried chicken, or the expensive coffee, whatever it is that they're putting forward, all these foods are very convenient. They're very dangerous to your health. And as people partake of these foods, there's a high medical cost that comes along. So as this high medical cost comes along and you see the results in the United States, and the pushback that's going on in the United States right now for unhealthy food, you see it's having a results. And most essentially, at the beginning of the article, you can see one of the results. KFC went from 5,200 and something outlets in 2002 to 4,100 and something outlets, 1,000 something drop of outlets. That's a massive drop for any corporation. We're talking about, individual buildings that have been closed, no longer in business, no longer a profit source to bring money into KFC. And now Nestle is trying to sell the candy arm of their company that does things like the Crunch Bar and stuff like that. So when you look at that, you look at there's a change, and part of that change is because of the health, all the health promotion on the internet, all the health promotion with seminars and stuff like that, where it's making people more and more eat less junk food. But what they're doing, they're just switching and saying, well, they're going to invest into some high-end hipsters outlets in America, and then outside of America, they're going to just invest in a lot of junk food and then sell it as it's something for affluent people who are getting some money and becoming modernized to partake of. And this is having an effect. But ultimately, what the problem is now, when you look at the results over the last, how many generations, where these companies had sold America and various other developed worlds or developed countries these sugary, deep fried junk food, what has been the results? And the results have been that the healthcare costs in America are so expensive, and the decrepitness and the sickness of the older folk in America is so expensive. And because of this now, we're having this crisis, this ongoing crisis in the United States, which now in the United States, the cost to take care of a person that's old, a person that's infirm and sick, and even the young people, is so expensive to take care of their health because they're so fallen apart at such a young age because of all these sugary, toxic, weird foods that people eat and think it's a normal part of being America. But it's just a normal part of being marketed and controlled by junk food. These costs are so expensive that it makes me have to think out loud and bring it to you here. What's going to happen to these foreign nations that are now embracing and being marketed to and being promoted, like what we read in the article, 7,000 workers working for Nestle that are going to the outer areas in Brazil, into the rural areas to get the people there to become customers. What's going to happen when they go now year in, year out, eating all these sugary fat foods? What's going to happen to the healthcare costs? Who's going to pay for that cost? And do they have a system in places like China, Brazil, that's able to handle all the medical arts, all the various different operations, and, as I said, knee replacement surgery, hip replacement surgery, all the bone damage that's going to happen because the people are going to start becoming more fragile. Do they have this? And my answer is that they don't, because what it is that the infrastructure in America is more advanced, and in many of these places they have some of those advancements, but a lot of those advancements they don't have. And the level of treatment that people get in America, and the cost, or these poor nations will be able to pay for it. And my answer to that is I don't see it. As I said, when last year when I was down in Jamaica and I was visiting, I was taken aback at almost the total takeover and dominance of fast food restaurants. I was really surprised. I was like, it's almost like they had like your regular KFC and probably McDonald's, and then all of a sudden, you're away for a few years. You come back, and then there's all these Wendy's and Pizza Hut and all these things, and they're doing brisk business. And I'm saying the more business they do, is the more colon cancers, is the more bronchitis, asthma, allergies, because like as I said, the better Pizza Hut does, especially in black communities, worse it is for the black community, because blacks in general are allergic to dairy. They're lactose intolerant. 85% of blacks are lactose intolerant, because Africans are not people who normally would drink milk, except for probably the Maasai tribe. So blacks in general, from a genetic point of view, don't process milk properly. But a lot of these foods that are being promoted are foods that have milk. And if you're not used to it genetically, it's going to cause you sickness. So you think about that now. So all these increase in disease, because now what you have is a diet now where you're eating meat almost 2 to 3 times a day. More meat, but it's more of that junky meat, that meat that is filled with all these hormones and stuff like that. So you see what's happening. Now, this is important to think about here, because remember what happened when, for years we had believed, but many people didn't believe with us, that tobacco was terrible for you. Nobody should smoke tobacco or chew it. And as the science keep coming in, and it was realized that these big companies had manipulated the government and the market and everything to promote their tobacco, and we started seeing the high cost of treating, oral cancer, throat cancer, lung cancer, all the different cancers that come along with tobacco. Then the government started stepping in and said, we need to do something. And as the government stepped in and started to do something about it, the numbers started to really come in, that it was very expensive to take care of people long term that was suffering for 5, 10, 20 years with emphysema before they die, for fighting lung cancer and oral cancer and all the surgery. I'm sure you've seen people who had their throat or whatever cut out of their throat and there's a hole in their throat and all this type of stuff. And you start to say, wow. So, just somebody buying a box of tobacco is very expensive. So what the American government did, because it is a promoter of freedom, is allow the tobacco companies to keep operating in America, but to have put high taxes on the tobacco, and then to protect the general public that are not smoking by, putting laws in place to make sure that smoking is not done in public places. And this now caused the tobacco company to basically start losing massive amount of money. So if you remember what the tobacco companies did, they simply just switched and they went to places like China and other places in the world and start to promote, Indonesia. I've seen stuff where they're doing all the promotion in Indonesia, and they basically switch the profit center from one location, which is in the West, and they just switch out over to Asia or to the East. Now, this is working, and as you know, you've seen many. Even in America, I've seen a lot of Asians who are, basically chain smokers. And so I often wonder what's going on in Asia, because that's where they're making their money. So this kind of, we call it playbook, is not new. As the articles say, these companies, they simply just basically pivot and just move to another location. And they just take the manufacturer to another location, and then they continue the same marketing. They just make it local. So imagine if you need to do advertisement of how to sell KFC or how to sell Crunch Bar. You don't even have to write new advertisement. You just have to get the old one translated and replace the stars in the TV spots and the radio spots with just people from the local market, and bam, you have success instantly because you already worked it out here. So this is what's happening. The similar idea with the tobacco is the same idea with the fast food, but with the tobacco, we're still dealing with the health effects and the damage that has been caused by the massive amount of people that were consumers of tobacco. So we're dealing with that, and we're still seeing the high cost of people smoking and the long-term suffering that it put upon them and the long-term medical costs. Now, as I've covered here, we've seen that even when somebody smoked tobacco, it increased almost every type of cancer that one could have, because ultimately smoke will starve your body. Smoke will starve your body of oxygen, and it put a lot of toxins in your system. So it increased all types of cancer across the board, because you're inhaling smoke. I mean, it's just totally counterintuitive. And so when you consider that, you consider, well, the cost that is on America, and America, one of the biggest problems that America is facing when it comes on to deficits and runaway cost that is causing America so much panic is medical. And the medical cost is tied into people with the worst type of diet. And that's just the reality. One of the worst things to treat is like diabetes, because it's a long-term disease that you just get worse and worse and worse until you get to a point where you start to cut off your big toe, cut off your foot, and so forth. But this is because of deep fried food and high sugary foods, which is primarily be pushed on by companies like Nestle and KFC. So when you look at these costs, you look at how these costs are ravaging the budget of the United States and the tax base, the taxpayers. And you think about it, I say in America, we have the massive hospitals, we have the massive insurance system, whether or not it's good or not, but they're there. The medical arts in America is so advanced, and the medical arts in places like Europe is so advanced, but they are pulling back from and trying to discourage in many areas in Europe and in America for people to be partaking of these high sugary, deep fried foods. So now the manufacturers just say, well, we're going to go abroad and we're going to go to developing nations. But these developing nations don't have the type of infrastructure that America has. And look what it's doing to America. Look, the biggest fight we have in Congress. It's an ongoing fight for the last 8 years about giving insurance to the poor. Because what it is that the type of cost that it costs to take care of people health-wise, especially when they're poor, because the poorer the people is the worse their diet and lifestyle. Is a lot of time is the larger they are. And the poorer they are is the more expensive it is. And nobody in America want to pay that type of cost. Most people, I should say, in America don't want to pay that type of cost because they're thinking, who's going to pay for these people? These people are so sick. You think about the places that has still high problems with drugs, high problems with, high amount of concentration of KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, all these very fast food in their community, low amount of health food, very limited knowledge about how to eat healthy. It would be the poor communities. But it's the same poor communities that can't afford the health insurance many a times. And they're saying, who's going to be paying for these open heart surgeries and so forth for these people? Nobody. So if this is the argument in America, and America is afraid of the results and are scared stiff of paying the type of costs for the medical care of people who are sick with long-term diseases. We're not talking about they get sick and 2 months later they die. If that was the case, probably wouldn't be a problem. Because, you just eat all the junk food you want. And then when you're about to die, you just get sick all of a sudden. And then you just drop dead. Well, everybody will be like, hey, no problem. Because at least, it's a quick kill. But with these diseases, whether it be high blood pressure, or coronary artery diseases, diabetes, cancer, any of these type of diseases that are, long-term disease, these lung cancers and so forth, most of the time the people don't die overnight. They live very long, and many times they can't be productive individuals in the society. So what it is that they basically suck more income or monies out of the system because of their sickness and the expense to take care of them than often they would have put in long term. And so they bleed the system, and the system get bled, and then the people are saying that we're losing our money because we have to pay so much for health insurance, but we eat a certain way in America. The other thing that's killing a lot of people is this coffee business. As you know, coffee is major. I always can say, you show me a person that is an incessant drinker of coffee, and I show you a person will die with pancreatic cancer. It is very much so linked. You see Steve Jobs, you see talking about some famous people that die from overuse of coffee, Steve Jobs, and the guy that was the head of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, and all those people. Every time I hear a person say, oh yeah, I'm a incessant drinker of coffee, I'll be like, yeah, you're just destroying your system with that poison. It's a poison. And yet this is what we have going on. So whatever it is they're chasing down quick money, they're chasing down things that are going to make them a lot of money. But the effects on the society is so expensive that I question myself when I go places and I see these new, especially poor communities, these new fast food restaurant popping up and more junk food in the stores. If I go into the store and I say I need whole wheat flour or I need organic whole wheat flour, and they look at me like I'm crazy, like where are we gonna get that from? And I'm like, yeah, but you have this sugary junk over here. Where are you getting that from? But that sugar junk will cause diabetes. Can your society afford it? And in many of these countries that are developing, what we have as even America here and in Europe, where we have some level of socialism, no matter what they call it, Medicaid, Medicare, health insurance, all of that type of stuff, which is just pooled, people pooled together to pay for each other's health. And when, in Europe, where they have some socialist systems where the government take care of the health, many of these poor countries don't have some of those mechanisms in place. And then the medical system is not that developed. And so when you have places where the medical system is not that developed and they're just giving basic care, unless you're really rich in those countries, you don't get the level of care they're going to get here. Who is going to pay for this? Because the disease is going to have the same results. Who's going to pay for that? Where's the money going to come from to pay for all these open heart surgeries? So you know what's going to happen? All these places where they're thinking they're affluent now and they're eating all that junk food. As the years roll by and the disease gets worse, what simply is going to happen is that they're going to suffer and die. That's all that's going to happen. And if they don't have enough money to fly out and fly to America or Europe to get care, they're just going to suffer and die. That's all. I remember years back when I saw the high protein diet was being promoted. And I guess I should say I'm not the only one that said this, but I was one of these people saying, look, you see those high protein diets, they're going to result in increased colon cancer in the United States. A few weeks ago or a few months ago, I did a program where I was showing that amongst young people and people, people in the 20s, 30s, 40s, there's been a massive increase of colon cancer diagnosis and colon cancer deaths. Because again, high protein was stuck in your colon. I don't care what type of protein, whether it be high protein tofu, high protein gluten, high protein meat, you're stuck in your colon and it's going to rot in there. And if it's meat, it's going to cause colon cancer. And now we have this. Now you're having all these young people now dying or being diagnosed and have to be doing operations at a young age for colon cancer because of the diet. The diet is junky, and the junk diet will create these type of diseases that are weird. So keep that in mind. I wanted to share that with you here. I want to share a few more thoughts here before we separate from each other. In Hosea chapter 4, verse 1, 2, and 3, we talk about this here as an increase. Now notice here, the Bible is going to talk about how as we move closer to the end of times, things are not going to get better, but they're going to get worse. And as they get worse, I encourage you as a fellow traveler together that you move towards a more natural plant-based diet. The healthier the food, the better it is. Don't believe that it's okay to eat junk food, soul food and all this craziness. You move away from that stuff. Notice you go into certain communities, you find Whole Foods, various different health food stores, restaurants, and you find that people look healthier and they're smaller and they're out jogging and stuff like that. But you find they're more affluent. You need to move in that direction. As you find that says these junk food stores, they're closing in those communities because those communities are not patronizing them as the poor communities. You need to move in a direction where you're eating healthier food, more organic food, more natural food, more tree ripened food. This is the best thing you can do for yourself because your body's not able to deal with what it was able to deal with 2, 3, 4, 500 years ago. That's just the reality. The scientists have gotten it wrong. They're saying that we're getting better. And I'm like, every time I think about that, I always think about a nursing home. It's crazy. You go to a nursing home, you see those nursing home patients. What you see are people for generations. They ate the Nestle foods. They had the hormone-filled chickens and the hormone-filled cows. And as they ate this food, the results can be seen. You don't want to end up like these people. And that's just the reality because they made a mistake. They thought that it was better for them to be able to take their family out for a nice bucket of chicken or some nice, pesticide filled and hormone filled burgers. And you can see the result of it. Years of not eating any nutrients, you end up messed up because your body is denatured. So let's read this text here. This text here gives us some insight of what's going on. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel. The Lord had a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. If you don't understand how things were created and why they were created, then you don't get it. You can't get what's happening. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out in blood toucheth blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwelleth therein shall languish. And the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven, yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. Now, I read that there because that word languish. Languish is this word here that normally a person is sick and they're sick for long term. When we look at 85%, and the number is probably even higher now, but most of the disease that people die from are not disease like your malaria and your disease that are communicable disease because of mosquito or the plague, like, come from rodents. People are dying because they're dying of lifestyle disease. And these lifestyle diseases, they are diseases that are languishing disease. That means you have them and you suffer long term until you die. So people might say, well, what's the point of life if I can't basically eat and just live life to the fullest and eat whatever I want to eat? The problem with that is that you don't want to say I'm living life to the fullest and die of a disease like emphysema, where you die 10, 20, 15 years after you realize you have a disease, and you spend most of your time with the oxygen tank and hole in your lungs. That's not a way to live. There's no way nobody can tell me that smoking cigarette for 20 years and then living emphysema for 20 years is a great way of life. That's a great life. It's a horrible life. Even somebody here was listening to me that had the disease. I'm going to tell you, I have a horrible experience. It was not worth it. And you should testify to others and tell them, it's not worth it. Stop it. And it's the same thing when it comes on to diabetes, when it comes on to high blood pressure or any coronary artery disease. These are diseases that you suffer with long term before you die. They're not worth it. It's not worth these junky food that people have. Notice we're now up to about 40% of the United States population is obese. It's not worth walking around with 50 to 100 pounds or 200 pounds extra on your body. That's just too much for your skeleton to be bearing. It's like you're going to the gym every time you get up out of your bed. And if your bed is being destroyed, people with that type of weight have to change their mattress often because they just destroy their car seats, destroy everything they sit on, because a lot of things are not made to bear more than 250 to 200 to 300 pounds. So when you look at life like that, and as a matter of fact, now they're putting up the rating on everything because they realize now they have to make things to bear 400, 500, 600 pounds. So anyway, when you look at life, you don't want to be that person that is the receptor or the receptacle for every junk food that is being put out, the receptacle for every drug, because your body is so riddled with disease, and the disease are preventable disease. You want to be that person that say, hey, look, I'm going to avoid these, Franken food, these weird foods. I'm going to avoid the lifestyle that leads to a lot of decrepitness. I remember there was this famous rock and roller. I think he sang or played with Mick Jagger. And I was reading a few years back. And he said if he knew that he was going to live to see 60, he would have done differently in his life. He would have taken care of his body. Because again, great if you're going to live to be 25 and you're not 20, you're listening to me. And you say, I ain't listening to that. I'm going to eat all the junk I'm going to eat and I'm going to die at 25. Well, I still would disagree with that, because you're living life with a low energy from all the low energy food you're eating. But if that's what you're going to do, well, you're going to bust hell wide open and you're going to do it fast and hard. I understand. But if you're planning to live for a few years from now, and if life lasts, we don't go to a nuclear meltdown or something crazy. Well, you know what happened? I will tell you, the best thing for you to do is to eat the high energy food, to eat more natural food, more tree ripened food, whatever food you can get in its natural state, however close it can be in the natural state. And I know people are going to say, well, it's more work, it's more time to prepare those type of food. Well, again, you're going to get paid back. The time you take to prepare the food is going to be the time put back into your life, into your body, into the energy. I'd rather live a day where I'm more energetic and more energized than go through the day dragging myself and going through sickness. I prefer it. I could look at this year, no sick, and stop and say, oh, I have to stay in bed because I'm sick. I didn't do that last year. To me, life is better this way. I don't have to worry about sick time, downtime. I don't have to worry about, I can go days hard before I say, you know what, I need some extra sleep. But if you live your life in a low energy because the food you're eating is low energy and you're making massive profits because they're feeding junk. The food is not, look, if you're buying something for $5 and I go out there and buy something for $8, trust me, you didn't pay, you're not getting your money's worth because the cheap food you're buying doesn't have anything in it. You're being robbed. So remember, in the last days, we're told that the diseases that the animals will be experiencing, the diseases that the human beings will be experiencing, according to Hosea chapter 4, verse 3, are languishing diseases, diseases that are long-term, and then the person ultimately die, but they die from long-term disease. Look at the famous people, look at the icons, look at the people that are dying from this type of disease, and don't tell me that their life is so great because they're so depressed, they're so messed up in their body and their mind from eating all this junk food. To me, they're a good example. You can read about them often in the newspaper because at least when they die, they tell you about their last few years. And many of them that die just kill themselves because they're just suffering from so many mental health problems, so many physical problems that they just hate life. And in this instance, I say, it's not worth living. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to be that person that spent years drinking your coffee, smoking weed, eating all this junk food, eating all this denatured food, and then you're 40-something, and your body is just riddled with languishing diseases. You're just sick as a dog, and you just say, man, it's not worth living. I'm gonna kill myself. Don't be that person. Don't be that person in the third world nation. Then look where you're listening to me from this morning. But don't be that person where, you know, you're living in a third world nation and you're eating all this junk food and never thought to yourself and say, who's going to pay for my healthcare costs? Who's going to pay for me when I have diabetes and high blood pressure and all these various different autoimmune diseases that nobody knows where they're coming from, these weird diseases that nobody can figure out where they're coming from because you're taking in all these weird hormones through these crazy foods. Don't be that person. Be that person. If you have trees near you, eat what's on the tree. God will bless you and you'll find your life will be much better. And you will live now like the affluent people in the United States because the affluent in the United States are moving towards health foods and whole foods. So jump ahead of the line and just skip the process and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be truly affluent like Americans. I'm going to go ahead and eat organic, natural, whole foods, certified foods that are good and are plant, tree ripe and all that. And you'll be truly living like an affluent American if that's your status symbols you're looking from. Be hip, be a hipster without coffee and all the other stuff. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, again for your love towards us. We pray, dear Father, that you may be with us as we go through the rest of this day. May you bless each and every one here, dear Lord, that they might take serious these things and do the best for their health and be active in their lives, that they might not suffer the consequence of bad choices. We thank you again for your word and for the blessings of your instructions. May you be with us as we go through the rest of this day. We pray for Christ's sake. Amen. Thanks again for being with me on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning where we should talk about current events. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.